Hello everyone and welcome back to Dhananjay Crime Facts. Today, we're taking a journey into one of the most mysterious prison stories ever told in American history. And trust me, by the end of this story, you'll understand why people are still talking about this case more than 60 years later. Have you ever wondered what it would take to escape from a prison specifically designed to be impossible to escape from? A prison surrounded by freezing water, a prison protected by powerful currents, a prison isolated from the rest of the world. A prison where the government believed no inmate could ever make it out alive. Yet on a cold night in June of 1962, something happened that shocked the entire nation. 3 men disappeared from that prison, and they were never seen again. No bodies were ever recovered, no confirmed sightings were ever proven, and even today, more than 6 decades later, nobody knows exactly what happened to them. Did they drown in the freezing waters of San Francisco Bay? Or did they successfully pull off the greatest prison escape in American history? This is the incredible true story of the Alcatraz Escape. And before we begin, it's important to remember something. This is not science fiction. This is not a Hollywood movie. This is a real historical mystery that continues to fascinate people around the world. Rising from the cold waters of San Francisco Bay, Alcatraz Island looked less like a prison and more like a fortress. Surrounded by strong ocean currents and freezing temperatures, it was considered the perfect location for housing America's most dangerous criminals. The island sat roughly 1¼ miles from the nearest shoreline. At first, that distance may not sound impossible. But the waters surrounding Alcatraz were among the most dangerous in the United States. Even experienced swimmers respected those currents. Many refused to challenge them. Before becoming a federal prison, Alcatraz had already lived several different lives. It first served as a military fortress. Later, it became a military prison. Then, in 1934, the federal government transformed it into a maximum security prison designed specifically for inmates who caused problems in other prisons. It quickly developed a reputation unlike any other prison in America. Alcatraz became known as the prison where the worst of the worst were sent. Some of the nation's most notorious criminals spent time behind its walls. Men like Al Capone and George Machine Gun Kelly were among its most famous inmates. The message was simple. If you couldn't follow the rules anywhere else, Alcatraz would become your final destination. Life inside the prison was extremely harsh. Every movement was controlled. Every action was monitored. Every inmate lived under strict discipline. Guards watched constantly. Nothing went unnoticed. Because of its reputation, any escape attempt was taken very seriously. The government viewed Alcatraz as the ultimate symbol of prison security. Over the years, several inmates attempted to escape. Most were captured, some died trying, others disappeared into the freezing waters and were presumed drowned. Every failed attempt made the prison's reputation even stronger. By the early 1960s, most Americans believed escaping Alcatraz was impossible. Many people viewed the prison as a place where hope simply came to die. But inside those walls were 3 men who refused to accept that belief. 3 men who believed the impossible could be done. Their names were Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin, and together they would create one of the most famous escape plans in criminal history. Frank Morris was considered exceptionally intelligent. According to prison records, his IQ was reportedly far above average. He had spent much of his life moving through prisons and reform institutions. Unlike many inmates, Morris didn't attract attention. He wasn't loud, he wasn't reckless, he was patient, observant, and extremely careful. While other prisoners focused on surviving day by day, Morris spent his time studying. He studied the prison, he studied the guards, and most importantly, he studied the weaknesses hidden within the system. John and Clarence Anglin were very different. The 2 brothers came from a large family and grew up working on farms. Unlike Morris, they were known more for their practical skills than their intelligence. They could repair things, build things, and solve problems with their hands. Growing up, they had also spent years around rivers, lakes, and difficult swimming conditions. Those skills would eventually become incredibly important. When Morris met the Anglin brothers inside Alcatraz, an unlikely partnership was formed. Morris brought intelligence and planning. The Anglin brothers brought determination and practical skills. Together, they began discussing an idea that most inmates wouldn't even dare think about. They were going to escape Alcatraz. At first, the idea sounded insane. After all, countless prisoners had tried before, and all of them had failed. But these 3 men believed they had found something others had missed. The first step was understanding the prison's weaknesses. Every successful escape begins with information, and Frank Morris understood that better than anyone. Frank Morris carefully studied every part of the prison. He paid close attention to guard routines. He watched maintenance workers move through different sections of the building. He observed areas that most inmates ignored. Day after day, week after week, he searched for anything that could be used to their advantage. Then one day he noticed something unusual. Behind the inmates' cells was a utility corridor that wasn't heavily monitored. At first glance it seemed completely useless, but Morris saw something others didn't. Years of moisture had slowly weakened parts of the prison structure. Around the ventilation openings beneath the sinks inside their cells, the concrete was beginning to deteriorate. The weakness wasn't obvious. In fact, most people would never have noticed it. But for three men desperately searching for a way out, it was exactly what they needed. It wasn't a large opening, it wasn't a major flaw, but it was enough to begin. Using stolen tools and homemade equipment, the men secretly started enlarging the damaged areas around the vents. The work had to be done carefully, the work had to be done quietly, and above all, it had to remain hidden. One mistake could destroy everything. If a guard discovered even a small part of the operation, months of planning would instantly come to an end. But the men remained patient. Night after night, after guards completed their inspections, they continued working. Slowly, carefully, methodically. Progress was measured in inches, sometimes even less, yet they never stopped. Every small piece of concrete removed brought them one step closer to freedom. To help conceal the sound of digging, Morris often played his accordion during recreation periods. The music helped mask suspicious noises coming from the cells. While guards heard music, the escape plan continued to grow behind the walls. Piece by piece, the concrete began disappearing. The process took months. Many people would have given up. Most prisoners would have lost patience. But these men understood something important. Escaping Alcatraz would require discipline just as much as courage. And eventually, their patience paid off. The openings became large enough for them to squeeze through. For the first time, they gained access to the hidden utility corridor behind the cells. It was a major breakthrough. Now they could move through areas that guards rarely saw. For the first time, the impossible no longer seemed completely impossible. But reaching the utility corridor was only the beginning. The biggest challenge still remained: escaping the prison building itself. And even that wasn't enough. Because escaping the building didn't mean escaping Alcatraz. The island was still surrounded by freezing water, strong currents, darkness, and a long journey to shore. Most experts believed nobody could survive such conditions. Even experienced swimmers struggled in those waters. The odds were terrifying. Yet Morris and the Anglin brothers refused to give up. Instead of seeing obstacles, they searched for solutions. If the water was too dangerous to swim across, then perhaps they could find another way. And that's exactly what they decided to do. Inside the hidden corridor, the men secretly created a workshop. Using materials stolen from around the prison, they began constructing equipment for their escape. Every item had to be built in complete secrecy. Everything had to remain hidden from guards. One of their most ambitious projects was a homemade raft. The idea sounded almost unbelievable. How could prisoners inside America's most secure prison build a raft without anyone noticing? Yet somehow, they managed to do exactly that. The men collected more than 50 rubber raincoats from around the prison. They carefully stitched them together. Then they sealed the seams to make the material waterproof. The result was an inflatable raft designed to carry them across San Francisco Bay. But that wasn't all. They also created homemade life jackets using the same materials. Everything was designed with one purpose in mind: survival. The work required incredible patience and creativity. Nothing could be rushed. Nothing could be left unfinished. Their lives would eventually depend on every detail. Meanwhile, another problem demanded a solution. Even if they escaped their cells, how would they prevent guards from noticing their disappearance during nighttime inspections? That question led to one of the most famous parts of the entire escape story: the fake heads. The prisoners carefully created realistic dummy heads using soap, paper, paint, and real human hair collected from the prison barbershop. The attention to detail was remarkable. From a distance, the heads looked surprisingly convincing. Placed on their pillows beneath blankets, they created the illusion of sleeping inmates. Night after night, guards walked past the cells without realizing what was being prepared. While the dummy heads rested quietly in bed, the real prisoners continued building their path to freedom. As the months passed, the escape plan became increasingly sophisticated. The men tested equipment. They improved their methods. They studied every stage of the operation. Nothing was left to chance. Every step was rehearsed, every risk was considered, every problem required a solution. By now, the plan had evolved into something far larger than a simple prison break. It had become one of the most ambitious escape attempts in American history. Everything depended on timing, everything depended on secrecy, and everything depended on the three men trusting one another completely. Then finally, after months of preparation, the moment arrived, June 11th, 1962, the night that would make history. As darkness settled over Alcatraz Island, the prison followed its normal routine. Guards completed their rounds, prisoners returned to their cells. Lights gradually dimmed. Nothing appeared unusual. Nothing suggested that one of the most famous prison escapes in history was only hours away. Inside their cells, the fake heads rested quietly on the pillows. To any guard looking through the bars, everything appeared perfectly normal. The prison slowly grew silent, and then the operation began. The biggest challenge, however, was still waiting for them. Even if they successfully escaped their cells and reached the hidden utility corridor, they still had to leave the prison building itself. And escaping the building was only half the battle. The real obstacle was waiting outside. Alcatraz Island was surrounded by freezing water, powerful currents, darkness, and uncertainty. Many experts believed nobody could survive such conditions. Even experienced swimmers struggled in San Francisco Bay. The odds were terrifying. But Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers refused to accept defeat before the attempt even began. Instead of focusing on the danger, they focused on finding solutions. If swimming was too risky, then perhaps they could build something that would help them survive the crossing. And that idea led to one of the most remarkable parts of the entire escape plan. Inside the hidden area behind the cells, the men secretly created a workshop. There, away from the eyes of prison guards, they spent months building equipment for their escape. Every item had to be carefully hidden. Every step had to remain secret. A single mistake could destroy everything. One of their most ambitious projects was a homemade inflatable raft. At first glance, the idea sounded impossible. How could prisoners inside America's most secure prison build a raft without anyone noticing? Yet somehow, they managed to do exactly that. The men collected dozens of rubber raincoats from around the prison. One by one, they stitched the raincoats together. They carefully sealed the seams to prevent water from leaking through. The process required patience, creativity, and incredible attention to detail. After countless hours of work, they successfully created a large, inflatable raft designed to carry them across San Francisco Bay. But they didn't stop there. They also built homemade life jackets using the same waterproof materials. Everything they created served one purpose: survival. The men understood that their lives would depend on the quality of their equipment. If the raft failed, they would likely die. If the life jackets failed, they would likely die. Every stitch mattered, every detail mattered. Everything had to be perfect. Meanwhile, another major problem remained unsolved. Even if they escaped from their cells during the night, how could they prevent guards from noticing their absence during inspections? That question inspired one of the most famous elements of the entire escape: the dummy heads. Using soap, paper, paint, and real human hair collected from the prison barbershop, the prisoners created realistic fake heads. The level of detail was astonishing. They carefully painted facial features. They attached real hair. They shaped the heads to resemble themselves as closely as possible. From a distance, the fake heads looked remarkably convincing. Placed beneath blankets on their pillows, they created the illusion that the prisoners were sleeping peacefully inside their cells. Night after night, guards walked past the cells without realizing what was happening. While the dummy heads rested quietly in bed, the real prisoners continued preparing for freedom. As the months passed, the escape plan became increasingly sophisticated. The men tested equipment. They improved their methods. They rehearsed different parts of the operation. Nothing was left to chance. Every step was carefully considered. Every risk was analyzed. Every possible problem was discussed. The plan had grown far beyond a simple prison escape. It had become one of the most ambitious and carefully planned prison break attempts in American history. Everything now depended on timing, everything depended on secrecy, and everything depended on trust. Each man knew that the success of the operation relied on the others. If one person made a mistake, everyone would suffer the consequences. Finally, after months of preparation, the moment arrived. June 11th, 1962. The night that would become legendary. As darkness settled over Alcatraz Island, the prison followed its normal routine. Guards completed their rounds. Prisoners returned to their cells. The lights gradually dimmed. Nothing appeared unusual. Nothing suggested that one of the most famous prison escapes in history was only hours away. Inside their cells, the fake heads rested silently on the pillows. To any guard looking through the bars, everything seemed perfectly normal. The prison slowly grew quiet. The island settled into darkness. And then the operation began. One by one, the men slipped through the openings they had spent months creating. For the first time, they moved beyond the limits of their prison cells. For the first time, freedom seemed possible. For the first time, the impossible felt within reach. But the most dangerous part of the journey was still ahead, because escaping Alcatraz required more than leaving a prison cell. It required surviving everything that came afterward, and waiting beyond those walls were freezing waters, powerful currents, complete darkness, and an uncertain future. The next few hours would determine whether the men achieved the impossible, or disappeared forever into history. As the first light of morning began spreading across San Francisco Bay, the guards at Alcatraz followed their normal routine. At first, nothing seemed unusual. The prison had operated the same way for years. Officers walked past rows of cells, conducting inspections just as they always had. From a distance, everything appeared normal. Prisoners seemed to be asleep in their beds. The island remained quiet. Then something changed. And this is where the mystery truly begins. A guard approached one of the cells and noticed something strange. The inmate inside wasn't moving. At first glance, it appeared to be an ordinary prisoner sleeping peacefully in bed. But when the guard stepped closer and looked more carefully, he suddenly realized something was wrong. Very wrong. The head resting on the pillow wasn't real. It was fake. For a brief moment, the guard froze in disbelief. Then panic spread throughout the prison. Within seconds, alarms echoed across Alcatraz Island. Officers rushed toward the cells. Doors slammed open. Guards searched every corridor. Confusion erupted throughout the facility. And then the shocking truth became clear. Frank Morris was gone. John Anglin was gone. Clarence Anglin was gone. The impossible had happened. Someone had escaped from Alcatraz. News of the discovery spread rapidly through the prison administration. Senior officials were immediately notified. Emergency procedures were activated. Search teams assembled within minutes. Nobody wanted to believe what had happened. For decades, Alcatraz had been promoted as America's escape-proof prison. Now 3 prisoners had apparently defeated it. Investigators quickly began examining the escape route. What they discovered stunned everyone involved. The prisoners had secretly spent months enlarging the ventilation openings behind their cells. They had created a hidden workshop beyond the view of prison guards. They had built realistic dummy heads capable of fooling prison staff. And they had somehow managed to construct an inflatable raft using stolen raincoats. Every discovery revealed another layer of planning. Every detail demonstrated extraordinary patience and intelligence. This wasn't a spontaneous escape. This was a carefully engineered operation. Months of preparation had gone into every stage of the plan. The more investigators learned, the more unbelievable the story became. How had the prisoners hidden such a complex operation for so long? How had guards failed to notice anything unusual? How had nobody discovered the enlarged openings behind the cells? And most importantly, where were the escapees now? Investigators followed the escape route as far as possible. Evidence suggested that the men had successfully reached the shoreline. They found signs indicating that the homemade raft had been transported toward the water. Several items connected to the escape were discovered near the bay. But beyond that point, the trail became difficult to follow. The cold waters of San Francisco Bay offered very few answers. Search teams immediately focused on what seemed to be the most likely conclusion. They believed the men had drowned. At first, that theory made perfect sense. The waters surrounding Alcatraz were extremely dangerous. Temperatures were cold enough to trigger hypothermia within a short period of time. Powerful currents could carry swimmers miles away from their intended destination. The bay was unpredictable, unforgiving, and potentially deadly. Many experts believed survival would have been nearly impossible. Yet there was one major problem. The evidence wasn't as clear as investigators expected. Over the following days, search teams recovered several items connected to the escape. A paddle was discovered floating in the bay. Fragments of personal belongings were found. Pieces of equipment linked to the prisoners appeared in various locations. But one crucial piece of evidence remained missing: No bodies were ever recovered, and that fact changed everything. In many previous Alcatraz escape attempts, prisoners who drowned were eventually found. The waters usually returned some form of evidence. But this case was different. Days passed. Weeks passed. Still nothing. Despite extensive searching, there was no confirmed proof that Frank Morris or the Anglin brothers had died. And because of that, the mystery only grew larger. As the investigation continued, newspapers across America began covering the story. Television stations reported new developments. Radio programs discussed possible theories. The public became fascinated by the idea that someone might have actually beaten Alcatraz. People couldn't stop talking about it. Had the prisoners drowned, or had they successfully escaped? The question captured the imagination of the entire country. Federal authorities launched one of the largest manhunts in prison history. Agents interviewed family members. Financial records were examined. Investigators followed leads from across the United States. Thousands of tips poured in from ordinary citizens. Most led nowhere. Many were quickly dismissed. Some initially appeared promising but later collapsed under closer examination. Yet despite countless hours of investigation, nobody could provide a definitive answer. The mystery remained unsolved. As weeks slowly turned into months, investigators continued studying every possible lead connected to the escape. Meanwhile, authorities learned more about the three men who had disappeared. The deeper they looked, the more impressive the escape seemed. Frank Morris was widely viewed as the mastermind behind the operation. His intelligence, patience, and attention to detail had clearly played a major role in the success of the plan. Investigators believed that without Morris, the escape might never have happened. He had spent years studying prison systems, years analyzing weaknesses, years learning how institutions operated. When investigators reviewed his background, they discovered a pattern. Morris was not the type of person who acted impulsively. He planned, he observed, and when he made a move, it was usually calculated. The Anglin brothers were considered equally important. While Morris provided strategy, John and Clarence Anglin contributed practical skills. Growing up around farms and waterways had taught them how to solve difficult problems using limited resources. Those abilities became essential during the construction of the raft and survival equipment. Together, the three men formed an unusually effective team. Each brought different strengths, each filled a different role, and together they created a plan that exceeded anything authorities expected. Months passed. The search continued. Yet the official position remained largely unchanged. The government still believed the escapees had drowned. According to investigators, the dangerous waters surrounding Alcatraz made survival extremely unlikely. But belief and proof are not the same thing, and proof remained missing. No bodies, no confirmed deaths, no final answers. That uncertainty kept the case alive. Then the mystery became even stranger. Over time, members of the Anglin family began sharing unusual stories. According to several relatives, strange events occurred in the years following the escape. Some family members claimed they received mysterious messages. Others believed they had seen signs suggesting that the brothers were still alive. At first, many people dismissed these stories. After all, families often want to believe their loved ones survived. But as more stories emerged, public interest grew. Some people wondered whether the family knew something investigators didn't. Others remained skeptical. The debate continued. One of the most discussed pieces of alleged evidence involved a photograph. Decades after the escape, a photograph reportedly surfaced showing two men living in South America. Supporters argued that the men looked remarkably similar to John and Clarence Anglin. The facial structure appeared similar. The ages seemed consistent. And some observers believed the resemblance was simply too strong to ignore. If the photograph was genuine, it could potentially change everything. It could suggest that the brothers survived the escape and spent decades living under new identities. However, critics pointed out an important problem. The photograph could never be conclusively verified. No matter how convincing it appeared, nobody could prove beyond doubt that the men in the image were actually the Anglin brothers. Without definitive proof, the photograph remained exactly what it had always been. A possibility, not a conclusion. Even today, people continue debating its significance. Some consider it one of the strongest clues in the entire case. Others view it as another dead end. The mystery doesn't stop there. Another unusual claim involved family gatherings. Some relatives believe there were signs suggesting the brothers secretly attended family events over the years. According to these stories, certain individuals appeared unexpectedly and then disappeared before anyone could properly identify them. Other family members claimed anonymous gifts occasionally arrived under suspicious circumstances. Flowers appeared, messages appeared, and some relatives became convinced that the brothers maintained contact from a distance while protecting their identities. Once again, none of these claims could ever be fully verified. There was no undeniable proof, no official confirmation, only stories, possibilities, and unanswered questions. Yet these stories helped transform the escape from a criminal investigation into something much larger. An American legend. As the years passed, new theories continued appearing. Every few years, someone introduced another explanation. Some researchers believed the escapees successfully reached nearby Angel Island before continuing toward the mainland. Others suggested they received help from people waiting outside the prison. A few theories proposed that they eventually left the United States entirely and started new lives somewhere else in the world. The possibilities seemed endless, and every theory kept the mystery alive. Because until definitive evidence appears, nobody can completely rule out survival. And nobody can completely prove it either. That uncertainty remains at the heart of the Alcatraz mystery. As the decades passed, researchers continued searching for answers. What began as a prison escape slowly evolved into one of the most famous unsolved mysteries in American history. Investigators revisited the case. Historians analyzed old records. Journalists examined forgotten evidence. And every new generation discovered the story all over again. One reason the mystery survived for so long was because technology continued improving. Years after the escape, researchers began studying the water surrounding Alcatraz in greater detail. Using modern equipment and computer simulations, experts analyzed currents, tides, temperatures, and possible travel routes across San Francisco Bay. Interestingly, some of these studies produced surprising results. Several researchers concluded that survival may have been more possible than authorities originally believed. Under the right conditions, a carefully planned crossing could potentially succeed. The timing of tides mattered, the direction of currents mattered, the exact route mattered. If everything aligned correctly, reaching shore may not have been impossible. Of course, these studies did not prove the men survived, but they challenged one of the biggest assumptions surrounding the case, the belief that death was inevitable. For years, many people assumed the prisoners had no chance. Now some experts argued that the outcome may not have been so certain. And once again, the mystery grew even deeper. Meanwhile, Alcatraz itself began changing. The prison eventually closed. Years later, the island reopened as a historic tourist attraction. Millions of visitors started traveling there from around the world. Many came specifically because of the famous escape. They walked through the prison corridors. They stood inside the cramped cells once occupied by Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers. They looked at replicas of the dummy heads that fooled prison guards. They studied photographs. They examined evidence. And almost everyone asked the same question: what really happened? The escape captured people's imagination because it represented something larger than a simple prison break. It became a story about determination, a story about creativity, a story about solving impossible problems. Every obstacle required a solution. Every weakness had to be discovered. Every risk had to be calculated. The prisoners had very few resources, yet they found ways to adapt. A simple spoon became a digging tool. Ventilation openings became an escape route. Raincoats became a raft. Human hair became part of a disguise. Ordinary objects were transformed into tools of freedom. That level of ingenuity fascinated people. Even individuals who believed the men drowned often admitted that the planning itself was remarkable. Many historians now consider the Alcatraz escape one of the most sophisticated prison break attempts ever attempted, not because investigators know it succeeded, but because nobody has ever been able to prove it failed. And that distinction is important. The lack of proof keeps the mystery alive. Even today, law enforcement agencies occasionally review information related to the case. Researchers continue publishing new theories. Authors continue writing books. Filmmakers continue producing documentaries. And audiences continue debating the same question that first emerged in June 1962. What happened after the men entered the water? Did the homemade raft survive the crossing? Did the currents carry them toward safety? Did they successfully reach land? Did they spend the rest of their lives under new identities? Or did they lose their battle against the freezing waters of San Francisco Bay? More than 60 years later, nobody knows for certain. And perhaps nobody ever will. Because some mysteries refuse to provide clear answers. Some mysteries survive longer than the people involved. And the Alcatraz escape is one of those mysteries. Every answer creates new questions. Every clue opens another possibility. Every theory introduces another debate. The deeper people investigate, the more complicated the story becomes. That is why the legend continues. That is why the case remains famous. And that is why millions of people still discuss it today. More than 6 decades have passed since that cold June night in 1962. Yet the mystery remains as powerful today as it was the morning the escape was discovered. Most criminal cases eventually reach a conclusion. Evidence is found. Questions are answered. The truth becomes clear. But the Alcatraz escape refuses to follow that pattern. Every piece of evidence seems to create another mystery. Every theory raises another question. And every possible answer remains incomplete. Perhaps Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin drowned shortly after entering the freezing waters of San Francisco Bay. Perhaps the powerful currents proved too strong. Perhaps the cold temperatures overwhelmed them before they could reach safety. That explanation certainly remains possible. But there is another possibility. Perhaps they survived. Perhaps their homemade raft worked exactly as planned. Perhaps they successfully reached shore under the cover of darkness. Perhaps they disappeared into new lives and carried their secret with them for decades. Nobody can prove either version of events beyond doubt. And that uncertainty is exactly what keeps the story alive. Whether they survived or not, one fact can never be denied. Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers accomplished something that countless others failed to do. They escaped their cells, they escaped the prison, and they escaped the island itself. At least long enough to create one of the greatest mysteries in American history. The prison that had been designed to be escape-proof had been challenged, and in many ways its reputation was changed forever. For decades, the government insisted that Alcatraz represented the highest level of prison security. Then 3 prisoners exposed weaknesses that nobody expected. They demonstrated that determination, patience, creativity, and careful planning could sometimes overcome even the strongest barriers. That lesson became part of the legend. Today, visitors continue walking through the prison halls. They continue standing beside the famous cells. They continue staring at the walls that once concealed one of the most ambitious escape plans ever created. And they continue asking the same question: what really happened? Unfortunately, the answer may never be known. Perhaps the truth remains hidden somewhere in forgotten documents. Perhaps it disappeared with the men themselves. Or perhaps it rests forever beneath the waters of San Francisco Bay. Whatever the truth may be, the Alcatraz escape remains one of the most fascinating mysteries ever recorded. A story of courage, a story of risk, a story of patience, and a story that continues to challenge everything people thought they knew about America's most secure prison. On a cold night in June 1962, 3 prisoners made a decision that would place their names in history forever. Against overwhelming odds, they attempted the impossible. And somehow, they got out. The rest of the story remains unwritten. Thank you for watching Dhananjay Crime Facts. If you enjoyed this historical mystery and would like to see more real crime stories brought to life through cinematic 2D animation, make sure to support the channel. And now, I want to hear from you. What do you think really happened to Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin? Did they survive and disappear into new lives? Or did they vanish forever beneath the freezing waters of San Francisco Bay? Share your theory in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and keep exploring the mysteries hidden inside history.